Hi guys! Are you ready to see a ton of progress here aboard Athena, as well as hear an epic tale of stupidity with just a tiny bit of bad luck mixed into it? I certainly hope so, because that is what you're gonna get in this video. First, I'll just get you caught up to speed on what has happened during the last week, and then we'll take a look at the laminate Thomas and I laid up last Sunday. I started out the week by removing the section of core that's immediately forward of the cabin tub. That took an entire day. It involved cutting the flange that supports the weight of the cabin tub to remove some old rotten plywood that was stuck in there. The easiest way I've found of doing that is by using an oscillating multi-tool to cut through the flange to expose the plywood. The plywood was secured with bolts through the bottom skin. Luckily, the plywood was so rotten that it was super easy to just tear out. The plywood was still soaking wet, and there would have been no way to salvage it. A fun little side note, notice the color difference between the foam that's just been exposed and the small little sample area I removed in the beginning of the summer? That surprised me a bit. And it's worth noting that the bottom of the foam that has been exposed for months now was still wet. Long story short, it sure is nice to get rid of all that wet and partially delaminated old core. The next day, Camilla and Sebastian swung by to lend a hand putting down the new plywood core. First step was to coat the back of the plywood. While they were busy doing that, I prepped the surface and got things ready up on deck. Camilla and Sebastian would mix up thickened epoxy, and I was struggling to keep up putting down the new core. Together, we quickly got the first 6 or 7 sections of the new core put down, but then something unexpected happened. But after a quick visit to the emergency room, we continued putting down the rest of the new core. The astute might have noted that in the second part of the time-lapse you just saw, I was wearing eye protection, and today I'm wearing my glasses rather than my contacts. So, can anybody guess what happened? I'm gonna tell you what happened, despite I'm sure I'm gonna get a lot of stupid, "I told you to wear such and such safety gear" comments down below. Well, the short version is I got a big blob of thickened epoxy straight into the eye. Not on the outside of the eye, like in between the eyeball and the eyelid. Sounds like a lot of fun, right? It didn't actually hurt a lot, but it was a tiny bit uncomfortable, and to be honest, I was also a little bit freaked out. What happened was one of those, oh, what the heck are the odds of that happening kind of situations. I was down below tightening the nuts on the bolts we used to pull the bottom skin and the new core together. I was using a wrench to do that, and I flung the wrench back towards myself to reposition it to tighten the nut. Just as I did that, a blob of thickened epoxy dripped down from an old hole in the bottom skin. The wrench caught that blob and flung it straight into my eye. I seem to have gotten away with it, meaning there doesn't appear to be any permanent damage, although my eye still hurts quite a bit from the doctor digging around in there to get all of the thickened epoxy out of there. And also when looking through this eye right now, everything is kind of yellow, but I'm sure that's just temporary. From now on, just refer to me as Mr. Safety Squints. Anywho, with the last bit of new core in place, and still with 2 functioning eyes I might add, the next day Thomas swung by the boat. I'm sure you guys remember Thomas from the last couple of weekends. He got busy up on deck removing the last section of foam, while I was down below prepping the supporting frame for the last of the hatches. Before we knew it, we had removed the very last bit of old core on deck. Well, minus a few inches behind the cockpit coaming, but that hardly counts. Ta-da! No more old foam core. And that basically brings us up till today. The very last thing we did yesterday before leaving the boat was to cut the new core for this section of deck. So all I have to do today is to get this adhered in place. Engage double safety squints. I'm going to start by adhering the plywood section here in place, and to do that I'm going to use the exact same process I've used for the rest of the plywood. I've put bolts in all the holes I've just drilled in the plywood, as well as coated all of the plywood with unthickened epoxy to make sure I don't get a dry bond. I'm going to mix up some thickened epoxy just like I've done a million times before, and you guys have seen that in a lot of the videos. I just thought I'd mention that I've used all of the 406 from West System that was in this container here, and the stuff that's in there now is the cheaper silica I've ordered from CFS. So far I have not been able to discern any difference between the two. They are, I'm sad to say, equally lumpy. Yep, lumpy. I've spread out thickened epoxy over a decent size area here. I've got a fair amount of working time with this epoxy, but this is what happens if you don't work fast enough. This turns into this. So I better hurry up and get this spread out. Things are moving along swimmingly here. I've already got the first 4 sections of plywood in place, but it is astonishing to me that even though I've now replaced the core in an entire deck, I still do a marvelous job of underestimating how time-consuming it is. I've just tightened the last 2 sections down below without getting epoxy into my eyes, I might add. And as you can see, I've got a nice amount of squeeze out here, so all that's left to do now is just to tidy that up a bit. Good morning, guys. Sorry about the abrupt change of day. It's the next morning. Like I said, I've got a real knack for underestimating how time-consuming it is to do work here aboard the boat. I was finished putting down new core at around 10 last night, and I thought I'd be home by 5. But the good news is I did finish putting down the new core, even though it was very time-consuming. So why don't we head up and take a look at it. Ta-da! Spiffy looking new core. Now it's only been on there for 8 or 9 hours, so I don't want to put too much weight on it yet, but it does feel rock solid. Fun little side note, I can't look at the deck here aboard Athena without seeing an emoji here. So that's the mouth, those are the eyes, there's the nose, and those are the eyebrows. Thomas is just around the corner, and when he gets here, we are gonna grab some breakfast and then we're gonna get started. With breakfast out of the way, Thomas is about to get started sanding the foam on the foredeck. The grit scorn foam has this kind of netting or scrim on top of it that's used to hold the foam together, and we need to remove that. The areas of the deck with the new foam core on it does still flex a tiny bit. The blue tape is located where there are bulkheads down below that supports the deck, so those are the areas we're going to be walking on. While Thomas gets some time in sanding, I'm gonna head down below and start removing the nuts from the bolts in the plywood. I'm sure I'll get a chance to do some sanding later today. Small change of plans. Before we go ahead and sand the entire deck, we're gonna put down something I can use as a guide for when I go to round over the edge of the foam. When I put down the foam, I purposely left it a little proud, so to get a nice curvature and a nice edge on this, I'll have to use my router. And we figured the easiest way to do that was to use something as a guide. So our plan is to screw this into the foam core and then run the router along its edge. To make sure the curvature of the guide matches the curvature of the hull, we've used this guide here to put some dots on the foam core. So it's simply just a matter of lining up the guide with the dots on the foam and screwing it in place. Unfortunately, we won't be able to actually round over the edge of the foam today because the only bit I've got for my router has this ball bearing here and that won't fit. So I'll have to get my hands on a bit without that ball bearing. I know exactly where to get that, but of course those guys are closed during the weekend. Good morning, guys. It's Sunday morning. I spent all of yesterday sanding the foredeck. I'm not kidding, the entire day. While I was busy doing that, Thomas got started on removing the last little bit of core behind the cockpit. He put in a ton of effort, but didn't make a lot of progress. Sadly, we have fallen victim to tool failure yet again. I don't know whether to laugh or to cry, but it is yet another oscillating multi-tool that has failed. This time around, it's this cheapo version, and this has developed some kind of bad connection in the cord near the strain relief. Now seems like a good time to give you a quick little update on the repair status on my two other oscillating multi-tools. My Bosch GOP 300 is supposed to arrive back from service sometime this coming week. As for my fine Multimaster 350, well, I sent this thing back to the shop where I purchased it a mere couple of days after it breaking down on me. About a week after having sent it in, I got word back that they were unable to find any issues with it. In a second, I'll turn this on and you should pay close attention to the motion of the attachment. Yeah, I can't find any issue with this either, besides for the fact that it's not working at fricking all. Sure, you might argue that this is an old blade and that it's worn or something like that, so why don't I swap it out for a brand new attachment? I don't know how the store tested this thing and got it to work, but I sure as heck can't get it to work. So I've sent them a video of this thing failing horribly, and I guess we'll see what happens. Originally, the plan was to lay up glass on the foredeck today, but there is still a ton of prep work to be done, and Thomas is sick, the poor guy. So the new plan is to lay up glass next Sunday, hopefully with the help of a team of 4 guys. So that leaves me today and next week to sort out all of the prep work as well as the area here behind the cockpit. So that means removing the last bit of core, hopefully with the help of a multi-tool that's actually working, clean up the surface, prep the surface, and then glass the gap that's all the way along here, put down new core, and maybe glass on top of that. Needless to say, I've got a pretty busy week ahead of me. As you can hopefully see, the foredeck is starting to look pretty spiffy after all of the sanding I put in yesterday, but there are still a few gaps I'll have to fill, as well as maybe another day's worth of sanding here, so yeah. So like I said, in short, busy week, but it should be doable. And that's fortunate because I still have that pesky around October 1st deadline breathing down my neck. Before I get back to my favorite activity of all, sanding, I promised you guys a quick peek at the new laminate Thomas and I laid up last weekend. Please bear in mind that this surface has seen a lot of foot traffic over the last couple of days, so it is a little bit dirty. But this is 4 layers of 450 gram biaxial laid up by hand, and that has yielded a 3mm laminate. That's pretty good in my book. Over here on the starboard side, I've already cut out one of the holes for the port lights. My reason for doing that was just pure curiosity. I wanted to get a good look at the new laminate. And here you can see that the new laminate is 3 millimeters thick. The old laminate is the stuff you see right here behind it, and that is a little bit thicker. I would say that is somewhere around 5 to 6 millimeters. You might have noticed the texture of this surface and that it looks a little bit rough. Now that is by design, and it's caused by the peel ply we put on top of the laminate. Looking through the comments on my last video, I noticed quite a few of you asking what the heck peel ply is. And well, it's this stuff. I'm sorry about not being able to go into any more detail about it in the last video. Things got a little bit hectic there towards the end. Peel ply is a synthetic fabric, and it feels kind of like that nylon lining that's on the inside of some coats. The biggest advantage to using this stuff is that when you put this on top of your wet laminate and let the laminate cure, then you can come back and peel this off, and you'll have almost no prep work to do before you're ready to lay up another layer of glass on your already cured laminate. The last thing you saw in my latest video was us peeling the peel ply off of the side decks. Now that is a little bit of a bad move, because that means I have to come back in and prep this surface before I can lay up more glass. Our reason for doing that was because neither Thomas nor I have ever laid up this much glass before, and we were kind of anxious to see how it turned out. Hopefully I get to show you this peel ply in action when I lay up glass on the small area immediately aft of the cockpit. I'm not going to bore you guys with all of the prep work I'm going to be doing today, because it is basically just going to be 8 hours worth of sanding. But before ending this video, I've got a couple of questions for the experts out there. Next weekend, when we put down glass on the deck, my plan is to lay down a layer of 830 gram triaxial as the first layer, and that is this stuff. This stuff is basically like a biaxial mat with 200 grams of fibers oriented in that direction, another 200 grams oriented in that direction, and then on top of those is 400 grams oriented in that direction. My plan is to orient this so that I get the 400 grams per square meter to be parallel with the center line of the boat. I'm worried that that thick 800 gram mat is going to be too heavy and too thick to conform to the shape of the core here on this soon to be rounded over foam. So my plan is to lay up that 800 gram mat up to the edge of this curvature, but not to extend it out any further than that. To put it another way, right up to this line here, but not over this radius here. And then on top of that heavy 800 gram mat, we'll be adding 400 gram biaxial, which is this stuff here, which as you can see conforms nicely to this curve. And that brings me to my question to you guys. How much glass would you put down? The old top skin is 5 millimeters thick, but it's made with chop-strand matting and polyester, and chop-strand matting is not really that strong. Now the bottom skin is only 3 millimeters, so there's a difference of 2 millimeters in thickness between the top and the bottom skin. It's my understanding that the extra thickness on the top skin is solely due to impact resistance. But the question remains the same: how much glass would you guys put down? I figured some of you guys might have the knowledge to save me from putting down too much glass. If that's not the case, I'm going to put down 1 layer of the 800 gram mat and 4 layers of the biaxial 400 grams per square meter mat. That should give me a thickness of roughly 5 millimeters, just like the old top skin. By doing that, I'll have way more glass than I think I need, but I'm not really concerned about the added weight. So yeah, at least I'll know that the deck is strong enough. But hey, if I could save myself from putting down extra glass, I would love to do that. That was the first question out of the way. Now the second question is going to be much quicker to pose and along the same lines, and that is whether or not you think I should add a layer of that 800 gram mat on this section here to help carry the load of the cabin top. Currently I've got 4 layers of 400 gram biaxial mat on there, and the fibers are oriented like this. What I could do was to come in and add a layer of that 800 gram mat so that I get the 400 grams per square meter fibers oriented in this direction. But the question is, should I do that? With those two questions now out on the interweb, I should probably get back to sanding. But first, a quick little side note. I know we shouldn't have extended this glass here on the cabin top up this far. By extending it up over the radius here on the cabin top, I'm going to be in for a heck of a lot of prep work. But yeah, this is just how it came out last weekend. And that is going to be it for this video. I'll see you guys back aboard Athena next weekend for hopefully my last weekend here in the shed. As always, feel free to leave a comment down below, and don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like. See you!